What? Good evening, villagers.
Good morning, good evening, good night. What all you telling all yourself? And welcome to another edition of the Heights Room. So we're just sharing it up the live right now. So we're asking the 27 folks who inside. Share up the live. Share up the live. Now let me get this thing going now.
Do your good deed for the day.
Yeah. We're telling yourself. And anybody on the Facebook, share up the live to the people in the WhatsApp and thing who not using the Facebook. You know what I mean? Because you know not everybody in the Facebook land. Blessed morning, Tulsi. Yes. So fellas, what was the latest on all and there? How everything? I got my my second job today.
Yeah, I know. I felt very left out. I surprised you get yours already. I'm slightly jealous. I'm not gonna lie.
3 weeks. 3 weeks.
You seeing stars yet?
How do we watch on FB? You just go to the Heights Room page on FB and it'll be going live there. Right? So just go to Heights Room on FB, open your FB, type in Heights Room, and it should be to the top of the page. Okay, let me just make sure it's pinned right now.
Yeah, you should pin that, man.
Yeah.
Pin it to the top, man. Pin it to the top, man.
Right, so it's pinned to the top. So you guys, if you guys want to look at it on Facebook, because we do have a lot more comments and engagement.
Oh, Carter, you broke up there, man.
Yeah. So you were going with you watching the Argentina match same time. So 1 goal pass, so you little turtle baby.
You ain't good, Kata. You ain't good.
Am I there? I see I'm going up and down. So if it is one of all, I have to take over during the thing, because I see my thing going up and down here, going green and going red. I don't know what's going on. Okay, flow again. Flow. You know how flow is.
Daddy Rilo, don't blame Flo. Daddy Rilo.
Daddy Buck. So borders to reopen, people. Borders. Let's see. You as a man on the outside, right? As a man on the outside, borders to reopen. What you really telling yourself?
Well, you see, boy. Oh gosh, all I'm asking for is a little clarity, fellas. You understand? And what I'm saying is, the borders open, you could come back in, but of course, you could come back in with restrictions. And I read in the thing, and what the man say is vaccinated citizens of TNT with a negative PCR test, 72 hours or less, you could come in and go home. Unvaccinated children, you could go home. Persons who not vaccinated must go in quarantine. But you see what I'm saying is, so on the 17th, non-nationals who have been vaccinated and have a negative PCR, is it that they cannot enter TNT? They can enter without quarantine, or can enter with a 14-day quarantine? Because me ain't too sure, and I get trained by Uncle Rowley, so I'm waiting for a detailed PDF to, to guide me modus operandi now, boy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well,
big up Sanjeeva for giving me that little heads up there. You know, son.
Well, to be honest, I just kind of like assume they mean that like once you get vaccine, you could come in without you get vaccine on a non-positive PCR test, you're good to go home. I just assume because I thought
even like, non-citizens.
I just assume that was just me hearing. So me know for sure exactly what's going on, because I think that's how that's how everybody else doing it right now. As far as I know, once you'll be able to provide that, because regardless of your citizens or not, once you're not bringing in COVID in the country,
you see, what happened is that he talked about 3 things, but he didn't talk about non-nationals who are vaccinated. He talked about non-nationals who are not vaccinated. So he's saying you'll get your problems by the border, but he didn't talk about non-nationals who vaccinated. You understand what I'm saying? So that is the part that little iffy there for me. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. But look, Rajiv. He feels his Petrochin here, but he confirming.
Well, once I get
non-nationals
stamp of approval, I know, well, you know what I mean? We did. You understand? Non-nationals cannot enter. No, that's not true. That's not true, Rajiv. That's not true. You're saying non-nationals who are not vaccinated would not be at this time allowed to enter TNT. No, you're right. But that's who are not vaccinated. What if they are vaccinated? I mean, it didn't explicitly say, because if you vaccinated and you hire Pfizer and that kind of thing, and you come for legitimate business, on what grounds will you say no? You know what I mean? And if it is you're saying non-nationals who vaccinated can't come in, then these are actually repatriation flights, which is a different category. In Micronesia down here, we did 2 repatriation flights so far, but that is a totally different sort of control mechanism. So it's like the first step of borders reopening. So if it's repatriation flights, okay. But my understanding was borders was reopened. You understand? Which is a different scenario. You know?
Right. Maybe.
But
we see on July 17th, because
July 17th.
So, man, notice your ball. We in Micronesia book we flight. You
well, you know what I mean. No, it's small island development states always one. Here 7 degrees on the equator. Trinidad is 10 degrees on the equator. So it's the same difference, the same love. The earth connected are just 2 sides of the world. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
So what's this thing now about C4 drones and jailbreak plot at Aruka maximum security prison? What's that one?
Bro, all that means is modern problems require modern solutions, bro. That's all that means.
So jailbreak, gone past the days of pickaxe and prison break
Yeah,
and
they're not doing that
going
no
under
more.
catacombs and then now men bringing in drone. They say, oh, that is how they dropping off drugs. You understand? So they probably buy the high-end drone where they make no noise, and then they bring in some drugs from the thing and they drop off some C4 and all kind of thing. You understand? So
That's it.
that is how they're doing it in Aruka Qatar. Wet.
Dropping off rice like UNICEF.
It's in Amazon.
That's it. Yeah, that's what's going on. So we can see what really take place there. But well, I guess the police doing their work. I think they find guns and all that thing as well.
Yeah. No, it was a serious haul they pull in there in terms of the amount of they say it was a full war. Them fellows was really basically looking to thing, and it was a conspiracy with officers and gangs and that kind of thing, because gangs in jail. I know if you ever watch the Netflix episode World's Prisons. Yeah, that's but that gangs thing in jail ain't easy, you know. So apparently, like, men pulled together and they say that men training for the last 50 days, certain groups in the jail real training hard. So like men was gearing up for the Escape Olympics, not yet. You understand what I'm saying? So men was really, you understand what I'm saying?
So private companies could import vaccines. Next thing's on the agenda. Private companies can bring in vaccines if they meet the criteria. But that was being said from a long time ago. I tell all I saw when Parasaram mentioned that, but people like it, you know, they skim over that and then start to talk about, well, how these people can bring in Pfizer and all this before we hear about the nationals. You know, the man say to have Pfizer in the country, then people say do have Pfizer in the country. All that. But clearly, as stated now, private sector getting involved.
You drop there a little bit, they cut us. I mean, hear one thing you're saying, but maybe that's for the better.
All right, I'm going to try and change, see if I could get a different source or something. You all take it
and come back. He ain't good.
Yeah. The reload flow again. You understand what I'm saying? We tell him go Pune. You understand what I'm saying? You want to take in the Pune field. You understand?
You want to take in the
Pune. This scene was serious, you know.
Yeah. I agree with Kevin Ali that Mr. Rajiv should have come. She should have come on live. I feel maybe next week is a chill out episode.
Yeah.
So maybe we could tell Rajiv come on and
reflections, you know what I mean? So you know, everything is everything, you know what I mean?
Look. Yeah. Bisham asking a question here. What went on with the Pfizer that come in for the national security group?
Yeah, so you see what going on there is that they basically saying here, well, if it is all you want, they realize that it come in, they real rate up Pfizer bad and real rinse him out and thing. You understand? But the reality is that the man was correct. It did bring in Pfizer. So what happened now is that they're letting people know, well, you know, they kind of paving the way then. You understand? They're saying, well, yeah, you could come in. You understand? If it is you want to bring in something, feel free. You understand? But, you know, it go have rules. And when you read the article, the rules are very unclear. You understand what I'm saying? So
right.
One day, you know what I mean?
Am I any better?
Well, I hear in your mouth.
You seeing me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I see you.
Yeah. We seen you good. You understand?
I don't know how long this will last, so let me hope for the best.
Yeah. Well, the bucko get protection. You know, that's what I'm saying. So you know, yeah.
Well, we have a hot topic for today.
Yeah, boy.
So I say before we go any further, the topic, this is for everybody. The topic we bring in today is very controversial, and we're asking that people do not resort to any name calling or personal attacks in the comments. We're not here for that. We're all adult people. We could have a discussion. We want to keep our interactions civil and respectful. Anything that we deem, that I deem as an attack, we will remove it. We're looking for maturity of thought, and clarity of expression. We want heights in here right now.
Heights, you know.
Look, Vanny telling you go by VJ.
I ain't going in VJ room. Trust me on that.
But yeah, bring it now. We could bring in the guests there. I will drop.
All right, so I want to I want to thank. So I'm sorry about my connection tonight, guys. This hasn't happened since the inception of the show, but you know how it goes with internet connection and Trinidad and Tobago. Now tonight's episode, as Torian was saying, it's probably the most controversial one we're going to touch on since the inception of the show. I would say some people might disagree, but we'll go with that. I would like to thank both of the guests for agreeing to come on the show tonight and participate in this discussion. Let's see, you hearing me good and thing there, right?
Yeah, you're right up.
Right. So it's not easy, right? To put yourself out there when dealing with a topic such as this. And what we are dealing with tonight is the LGBTQ community in Trinidad and Tobago. We're asking, is Trinidad ready for equality? We're asking, is Trinidad and Tobago ready for LGBT rights to, you know, be the central focus of our human rights? You know, the laws that we're looking to create over the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years. We have had some strides being made over the last, let's say, 5 years. There has been one major hurdle crossed with the buggery law. And what we're really asking is, has that changed anything in the public? You know, has it really changed our nation's perception of people who belong to the LGBTQ community? So I just want to thank both guests for coming out tonight, because this topic is one that it's not easy to talk about. And I had to go through a lot of different people before I could get to people who was actually able and willing to come on the show. So for you guys representing both sides of the discussion tonight, we are very grateful. So bringing first onto the screen, we have James Lanser. James is a 23-year-old Trinidadian journalist whose work typically of the 868 project.
You had a little bit of a drop there. Yeah, for a while I heard you there, but a little drop. But it's okay.
Yeah,
you know, no need. There's no extensive credentials here to list out when introducing a guy like me. So no worries.
Nice. But yeah, thanks for coming on the show, brother. I really appreciate it. As I said in the email before, we know it's not easy. So, and next we're gonna bring in our next discutter, who is here.
Yes, our next guest. You hearing me?
Yes, go on.
Me? Right. My next guest is Terrence Bhagwansingh. Terrence is a 24-year-old final year medical student and fitness trainer. He's passionate about LGBTQ plus activism and is currently...
Oh, he did. Don't worry, it happened to me too. Don't feel
groups left vulnerable as a result of race, socioeconomic status, gender, identity. So am I dropping again?
Yeah, yes. Man. Pay flow the money now.
Taurean, take over for now. I'm gonna see what I can do. All right, take over for everything now. You have the subject to deal with.
Yeah. All right, later. Yes. So sorry about that, gentlemen. I don't know who to blame for this, you or James or Terrence. I don't know what's really going on. But I guess we're gonna start off an easy question, or depending how you take it. I'll put this one to James first. What does tolerance mean to you, James?
Tolerance. Well, I mean, thanks for having me on the show, everybody. Well, guys, who put together the show, first of all, you know.
Okay.
I would think that tolerance, simply put, would just be a basic understanding that I have of tolerance. I haven't seen it in the dictionary recently or anything to say, and I've checked this, but I would just, from my own experience, and I think it would probably be accurate to the dictionary definition as well, to say that tolerance is putting up with or coexisting with people who hold a position that you disagree with, or that may even be erroneous to a certain degree. And I think that it can be, and it can take place on a legal level as well, that the government can know something is wrong, but tolerate it to a certain degree so that it does it's not as evil as actually going directly after the group that you're tolerating, so to speak. But that's what I would say about tolerance.
Okay. And what are your thoughts on it, Terrence?
So I think tolerance means that everybody should be free to live their truth without fear of, without discrimination, being discriminated against. And they should have access to the fundamental human rights that are laid out by the HWO, like the right to expression, freedom of expression, to have a family, to privacy, and so on.
Okay. Fair enough. So moving on into things that are a little more serious now. In 2018, Judge Devendra Rampersad said sections of the Sexual Offences Act, which prohibited buggery and serious indecency between two men, criminalized consensual same-sex activity between adults, and were unconstitutional. The case was brought up in 2017 by Jason Jones, an LGBT activist who lives in Britain but was born in Trinidad and Tobago. What are you guys' thoughts on this ruling, and do you think it's a step in the right direction? I'm going to start with you, Terrence, on this one first.
So I definitely think it was a step in the right direction. I was very happy to hear that ruling because it gave me hope that Trinidad and Tobago could move forward as a secular nation, and that we could, one day achieve the rights that we deserve as a LGBT community.
Okay. James?
Well, just a little bit of a step back before I speak specifically on this.
Sure.
With regard to tolerance, I think that Terrence said something that is important in his view of tolerance, that it be and allow for the freedom of every single person to believe and to hold their own truth. And I think that this is a very dangerous idea, because it essentially is arguing that there's no one truth. There's no universal truth that applies to all men. So how can, for example, if a different society, different to Trinidad, decided they would make it law by democracy or by whatever form that they choose, that for example, murder is okay because this is their truth. It doesn't make it okay, but this is the reality that everybody accepts, because universal truth exists. Without universal truth existing, there's no need for this debate, there's no need for this discussion, because everybody would inertly know that they can do whatever they want anyway. Nobody believes in it in the heart and in their heart. But to come now to the next question on changing the buggery law by Jason Jones, what do I think about it? It's a very complicated situation, but what initially strikes me about it is how non-local and non-authentic the entire situation played out. If you look at the individual who brought it about, although he's born in Trinidad, we must give that to him. Nobody can take that away. He's not actually real Trini born through and through, so to speak. He's not even in Trinidad right now for the entire time of the case that was before the court and whatever. He spent a significant amount of time in the Hilton Hotel. It's not known how and who was really behind the changing of the buggery law, because for those of you who are not known, just a little bit of background information on this law is that it was a constitutional law, so it was not able to be changed no matter what. Since Trinidad and Tobago became a republic, became an independent nation, the buggery law was not allowed to be altered or changed. This is like it's equivalent to the American Constitution in America, right? You can't without a constitutional amendment, which is changing the foundations of the country, you could not affect a change in this law. But what happened was, I think one of the governments decided that they would actually decrease the amount of time somebody would be sentenced to prison if they broke the law. And when they changed this, a high level legal move by very, very smart and cunning lawyers was made that said, hey, they changed the sentence amount, which means that we now have a legal case to actually challenge this law. There's no way that just some random, homosexual guy living in the UK who's not attached to Trinidad deeply and who didn't know about Trinidad law really well was able to come and attack this law. So it really brings a whole lot of questions into who was really behind it, how was it really, how it went about. And what I know about it is through other lawyers. I'm not a lawyer myself, so there's potential that a lot of what I said in terms of the nitty-gritties of it, in terms of words like constitution and stuff like that, it may be wrong. So that's a little bit about it. Do I think that, and it also shows that this LGBT movement is not coming to Trinidad, and it will never come to Trinidad in a democratic manner. Trinidad and Tobago, if you go and if you do a poll, if you do anything, and I think all of you know this, that we are opposed to the LGBT movement. Trinidadians, common man, is opposed to this movement. And this was one of the largest protests that we've seen in recent history when this entire thing went down. But you know, the media and everything was really, really funny to watch. I remember they interviewed, you know, a very well level-headed thinking guy who was, you know, he believed in the LGBT movement. And then on to represent the other side, they interviewed, you know, the past coup attempter, Abu Bakr. So it's not a fair description that the media painted either of the two sides. I think it was a step in the wrong direction, not a step in the right direction, because I believe that homosexuality and the open promotion, the legal acceptance of homosexuality will lead to the general acceptance of the LGBTQ movement, which is very problematic for a serious number of reasons, which I hope that I could elaborate on more in further answers to other questions, etc.
Right. We'll get into that. Just to recap a bit. So part of your issue is the fact that it is not, how shall you say, a grassroots sort of movement. That is part of your issue here, is that we almost kind of like, we see something going on outside, so we got to be part of it. That's part of your issue, if I understood what you said correctly?
Correct. I mean, if you look at a lot of the LGBT proponents, they are very much anti-colonial. They have this idea that, you know, that we cannot be, or we cannot hold to our colonizers. We have to be free from them and come up with our authentic culture and all of this. But then the moment Britain or the United States or basically Spain, you know, any one of our literally past colonizers come up and say, hey, you know, LGBT is this new thing that everybody should accept, you know, and start to put it into their laws, they're all up in arms. We should do it too, you know. They want to follow the colonizers, you know, at a moment's behest. It's really, really funny to see how that whole thing switches around.
Okay, so Terrence, as someone who's part of the community, what are your thoughts on, does it even matter where it starts from?
Well, firstly, no, it doesn't. But secondly, we have a lot of LGBTQ members in Trinidad and Tobago who, we have very loud activists here in Trinidad and Tobago. Jason Jones is just one person. And yes, he challenged that law, but we have plans to challenge many things and many policies. Trinidadians who live here have been living their whole life. We have plans to challenge many policies and legislation, you know. So we live our whole lives here, LGBTQ plus. We are not imitating anybody else away. Nobody would just choose to be a part of this community because they see somebody else doing it. It doesn't work that way. The amount of discrimination and hate and danger that we face, nobody would just choose to do that because we want to imitate somebody else.
Okay. Are you guys hearing me good and stuff? I changed locations, and I really hope that things are better at this point. Although I'm seeing.
You know, I don't want to interrupt Terrence or anything like that, but I just want to, I do see the comments flying on the side. There's one from a guy named Arnold Nicholas Rampasad, who's, you know, I mentioned something about the colonizers and all this stuff, and he instantly jumps on me.
Let me see if I can bring that up there so people can see what you're referring to. There you go. Oh, I think we lost James for a bit there.
All right. Am I still here, or did I just drop a little bit too?
You dropped a little bit too.
All right. So I don't know what happening. Right? I don't know what happening. I think we're getting sabotaged, right? And it has something big at play here. All right, that's an bigot play here.
Am I back yet?
Yeah,
you're good to
you
go.
are.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that this is the kind of thing that people who are opposed to this movement are very much afraid of, and it's starting to happen in Trinidad now, where you speak and it's no longer real genuine discussion happening. It's an attack on your skin color, attack on your social class, attack on your who it may be, and this is the kind of thing that I mean, it's right there in the chat for everybody to see. That the first thing that he would resort to saying is, "Hey, this guy is white, so his argument is no longer valid." It's like, where's the reason in this? It's just racism.
Perhaps, but I guess this is at the same time, in the same way that you have your thoughts on the situation, I guess folks in the comments have their thoughts on the situation, and I guess in some ways we can't ignore the fact that not so much that is racism, but that is the reality of the situation. In some regards, you do represent, at least you do present a visual reminder of that colonial past that you're referring to, that people will pick up on, right? So, but fair enough. That's why we tell you, ignore the chats. Ignore the chats. But fair enough. Let's keep it moving. So Terrence kind of touched on this a bit before in his answer, but in general, do you think there are any other infringements on the rights of the individuals who belong in this community, Terrence?
Oh yeah, definitely. So to start with, sexual orientation and gender identity is not included in the Equal Opportunities Act of Trinidad and Tobago, which means that it is legal to discriminate against anybody that is in employment, education, housing, healthcare, in any area. You could discriminate against somebody legally based just on their orientation or their identity. And then after that, then we could talk about it's not legal to have sex or to get married or to adopt children or to donate blood. You know, the very most basic thing, discrimination, you know, we're not protected against discrimination.
Okay, fair enough. James, what are your thoughts on that question?
What exactly was the question? Sorry, I didn't hear it.
The question was, do you think that there are any other infringements on the rights of the individuals who belong to the LGBTQ community?
No, there is no infringements to the rights of LGBT individuals. They start off just like all other individuals in Trinidad and Tobago, exact same civil liberties, and they are afforded the exact same opportunities. It's very hard to go forward without. I just want to say a very small side note, because if not, generally just talking about everything, we kind of get lost, so to speak. My points when I say the community, because there's so many different subgroups that make up the LGBTQ plus movement. Forgive me, Terrence, if I left out any other acronym that is attached to the alphabetical chain. The whole entire group, they have so many different peoples that are a part of this group, and I want to make it clear that when I speak about the group, I'm referring to generally two principles that I think are more or less agreed upon by this group themselves. And it is that first, gender is fluid, or that people are what they think they are. That's another way of phrasing it. And the two, any sexual act that is pleasing to them, to the individuals that engage in it, is morally good. Okay? So people can love whatever they want as long as it is consensual, and there's nothing actually wrong with this. So these are two sort of pillars upon which the entire LGBTQ plus two or whatever it is community stands. These are two major columns, or another way to understand it is these are the two legs that they use to move their entire movement. And I believe that these two basic principles are erroneous, And I do not think that it is not just my personal opinion. I think that this is genuinely true, and it's universally true. That if I said right now to you guys, I believe I'm a African American woman. I'm not entitled to get that American citizenship. I do not have any woman features, and it's just not true. And if I decide that I want to love something that is not good or is not natural for me to love, it doesn't make it right. So
Yeah. Yeah.
these are really core principles that I think if we
So
go on and talk about LGBTQ rights and stuff, that question is based on the idea that you accept that the LGBTQ community is good, that the people who make it up are not engaging in anything wrong, and that everything is fine, and then therefore you should protect everything that they do and make it good. But this is jumping ahead and starting on the premise that you accept the community. So it's going to make anybody who's against them seem like a bigot because they
right. Well,
you know.
yeah. So we don't want to reach a point of judging, but let's keep it in the context of dealing with this segment of the episode, treating with the legitimacy of the movement itself. Let's touch on that. So one of the things that you mentioned. So we'll deal with the two pillars, all right, as you mentioned, James, all right. But let's start with the first pillar, which is you mentioning that you believe that this community is doing something that is morally wrong. From your perspective, that is morally wrong. All right.
Correct, yeah.
Let me put it off to Terrence before we, as the host, come in. What he thinks on that interpretation of that first pillar. Now, keep in mind the broad topic we're dealing with is the legitimacy of the movement, which we have several things to talk about. But let's address James' 2 points first. The first one being that it is morally wrong. Terrence?
Well, in my view, it isn't morally wrong because my religion, which is Hinduism, supports and embraces the LGBTQ plus community. So to me, I'm not sinning or I'm not doing anything morally wrong. There are many religions that are in support of the LGBTQ community. So if there's a problem in another religion, to me that doesn't necessarily need to apply to me, and it shouldn't dictate policies that apply to me.
Right. So what do you think about that one, Terrence? So this is no, sorry, James. So the logical, and remember, as I tell all is heights we're talking, right? Is to allow people to unpack their perspective. So Terrence's perspective is that morality is grounded in religion, and that, of course, that your perspective is coming from the perspective of a certain religion. But he is saying from a Hinduism perspective, which is the religion he belongs to, it is not a morally wrong thing, and that it's not a sin, which, I mean, as an objective person coming out from the outside, seems reasonable. Tell me, James, if you could respond to that.
Yes, well, in the context of speaking in a secular society, and Terrence actually alluded to the fact that he was looking forward to being a part of a secular society. We would actually avoid and not try to bring religion into the topic of the discussion, because really and truly, what his religion thinks about it, what my religion thinks about it, really and truly, it will form what a lot of people think about it. This is true, and he is correct in that. But at the end of the day, they do not have any legal power. We're not living in the Middle Ages where, the bishops have some kind of legal power to influence the state. The church and the state are separate. All churches and all the states are separate. So really and truly, it's funny because you do have people like myself who I am a Christian, and I do believe in the Christian religion, but I'm not none of the points that I've argued come from that. I'm not even going to bring that up. And I mean, that's an entirely separate debate. We're talking about whether it's right or wrong from a legal and from a universal perspective. This is the point. It has nothing to do with religion, because, okay, I'm a Roman Catholic. If tomorrow, for example, the Holy Roman Pope that I believe in comes and says from the balcony tomorrow that, every single person of a different race is now a second-class citizen in all countries, and all governments should uphold this view. because I am a Christian and because I know that the Holy Roman Pontiff has very much control over doctrine of the Catholic Church, I am bound by my conscience, by my knowledge to disobey what he's saying. It doesn't matter that it's my religion's view. It doesn't matter that it's my religion's opinion. It's a wrong thing. He said something wrong. It is objectively wrong.
You all hearing me?
Yeah, we hearing you good there, Cutter. Come true.
Sounding good finally?
You're breaking up a little, but come true.
God. James, what makes it wrong?
What makes it wrong?
No, this is from not from a religious, and we appreciate your point, and we appreciate that logic, James. So the logic now is now reverting. So let's revert it away from a religious standpoint. And how you're doing is that you're framing the concept of morality from a universal, the two words you said is a universal and legal perspective. So explain to us really what is that grounds for this morality, this determination then.
For sure. I think, well, I'm very interested in philosophy and in history also, and it's a debate that has gone on for very long, and I think it was really settled, and it promoted the real expansion of the Greek Empire, if you go back as that far, and it really was solidified with people like Aristotle and Plato, who said that they weren't members of any religion. They had some folklore about Zeus and all this stuff, but they weren't real followers of that. They basically came and they said, well, it is really true that there is a natural law that all men, no matter where we go, we go to Asia and we find that they uphold these same laws despite having different legends and stories about religion compared to us. They know that we shall not kill. They know that we shall not treat our wives badly. They know that we should not do these things. So there is, generally speaking, and I think that most people would agree, that there are certain things that are there's a kind of a natural law in the universe that you will find throughout all cultures, throughout all nations, prior to them being exposed to certain religions, or that they didn't speak the same languages or any of these things. So I think morality is very much something that it's like the laws of nature that are there for animal kingdom exist. We have an intelligence and we kind of have to understand it, if you know what I mean.
But James, there's homosexuality in the animal kingdom. Plenty of it. Did you all hear me?
Yeah.
Say it again. So I heard something about homosexuality in. Correct. Yeah, this is a good point. Yeah. Well, I would like to say something on this. There's the most famous scientist who studied. He's a biologist. He's a Canadian. His name is Bruce Bagel-Mill, and he's very famous for studying and having very high credentials. He's a biologist, like I said, an expert on animal sexual behavior. He devoted much of his life to studying sexual matters in the animal kingdom. And he found that although same-sex interactions, this is a direct quote from his work, although same-sex interactions involving genitalial contact have been reported in hundreds of animal species, they are routinely manifest in only a few. Simon, stated that although homosexuality behavior is very common in the animal world, it's to be very uncommon that individuals have a long-lasting predisposition in such behavior to the exclusion of heterosexual activities. Thus, a homosexual orientation, if we can even speak of such a thing in animals, seems to be a rarity or even a mistake that these animals engage in. Okay, the motivations for the implications of these behaviors are yet to be fully understood themselves. So this is this idea that there's animals out there that run around and actually actively have gay sex all day all night and then go and have more gay sex tomorrow. It doesn't really happen like that.
What I'm saying, James, is that you reference the animal kingdom and you reference natural law and you reference not like saying that there's just this moral code that exists within eons, and you bring up Aristotle and you bring up all these things about so much years of philosophy and all of this. But during all this time, there has been homosexuality in all these cultures. They have always had homosexuals. There have been earlier you talked about how we follow in America and we follow in the colonizer and all of this, and that yet we're talking about Aristotle and we're talking about Plato and thing, and it's like, so if homosexuality occurs in the animal kingdom, whether it be that we all of a sudden know animals making a mistake, so all of a sudden we know animals make a mistake, all right, cool, and we're saying that there's this natural law and this moral code, then why is it that this thing exists so everywhere, and how can you just now say that, okay, well, it's a mistake everywhere it happens, it's a mistake, it's an error, it's a I do get how, and then earlier now you say that people following America are kind of confused as to what is.
I get your point.
But so my last thing is, which I still don't find it in answers yet, is what makes it wrong?
Right. What makes homosexual sex wrong?
A mistake. Yes. What makes it wrong? What makes it
right. Okay. Let's just deal with this first. There's a good point that you made first that I would like to address, which is that it has occurred for centuries. It's undebatable. It's a truth that you say. I can't stand up here now and say, no, it didn't happen. It's just a recent thing. It's not true that homosexual behavior exists and is recorded to exist a lot back in the day as well too. But this is not a reason by which we make laws. It's not a good reason by which we say something is right and something is wrong, because the murder exists for as long as we have human record. We have many accounts of murder, and nobody will stand up and say, hey, murder exists, so we have a good reason to say that they have a legitimate right to be free in their murder. But now before
can say why murder is wrong categorically,
right? So now, yes. So let us see why homosexuality is wrong. Let us actually look at the heart of the issue now. Okay. First, homosexuality. You need to understand, when we talk about homosexuality, we're not talking about, and I'm not here to argue against people who have homosexual inclinations. No, that's not the idea. I'm not here to say that anybody who has homosexual attractions is evil and is engaging in something wrong, because somebody here might have the idea to steal something one day, but we do not say that is wrong. The idea in their mind is not the idea. The idea is something else. We are talking about the actual action when it occurs. Homosexual sex. That is the thing that we are going to say now. It is wrong. Okay, that's the first thing I need to make clear. The second thing, well, if we are saying that homosexual sex is a wrong thing, or we're going to make a judgment on it, it's right or it's wrong. If we're going to analyze it, we need to say, what is sex? This is the first thing. What is the act of sexual intercourse? Scientifically, what is it? What is the actual action for? What is the purpose of the action? Because this is what determines what a thing is. Okay, so the action of the sexual intercourse, okay, is for the scientific reason, is for the production of the species for reproductive purposes. Okay, it's like that famous quote, "You're here because your dad's not queer." The deal continues because of sex, of normal sex, of regular sexual intercourse. The sperm was made to meet with the ovum and form a human being. This is what sex is for. Attached to the sexual act is satisfaction in your senses. So, for example, it's just like eating. The purpose of eating is to fill your belly with food so that you are nourished, but you enjoy eating as well. You can do a wrong in that by over enjoying eating and vomiting your food and eating more food because you just enjoy eating. But that's wrong. That's not right.
But do we stop people doing that?
Yes,
but
we do. We put them in.
James,
We put people who do that in mental institutions. They have a problem called bulimicy. People who are bulimic is a real mental problem.
I got mute, Kata. So James, sorry to cut you off there. I would like to bring Terrence into this conversation here, as he is part of the community, and I think we should allow him.
Sorry, I mean, I still haven't got to make.
That's okay, brother. No problem. We got time.
Okay, go ahead.
We got time.
Okay, so James just said a lot, but I will just bring up one concise point with a large body of evidence supporting it. So all major medical organizations, the WHO, the World Health Organization, or the American Psychiatric Board, all of them consider homosexuality to be a natural and normal variant, a healthy, natural, and normal variant of human sexuality, in that it does not disrupt the functioning of a human being. It does not cause distress or of any kind to a human being. It's no kind of disease. And so in no part of the medical world is it regarded as unnatural.
Well said. Well said. That is a fair point. Actually, there's a lot of scientific evidence. I saw somebody comments talking about science. In support of you, James, science doesn't back up the. So is the WHO part of this, like touching on what you said earlier, like a movement to like force things upon us? Then, or are they using science, or are they not using science?
Well, the World Health Organization is a very, very, I would say, controversial organization, depending on which footing you stand in most political in most political events. For example, the World Health Organization is just a branch of the United Nations, who was promoting LGBTQ, gays, all of this way before they had removed a lot of things. They had advocated, for example, to change the definition of gender dysphoria from a mental disorder. In 2015, they changed it from, on the American Psychiatric Association, I believe it was, in 2015, to say it was normal, that people who suffer from gender dysphoria have a normal, and they don't have anything. It's not a mental problem anymore. We were wrong for all these centuries. And this is, it's, if you trust the World Health Organization, and at the end of the day, it's very possible to have a body of people, a organization like that, be wrong. It's whether I think that Cutter brought and made a very good point, that we have to see if it's wrong and why it's wrong, and go back to tackling that. I didn't finish seeing what I was seeing in that regard. We can do that, but that's just pertaining to homosexuality. I would have actually preferred to debate the entire LGBTQ community. I think that is
well, I think
what I was here for.
We'll come to, I'm sure with the episode going forward, you could bring up more of those things, right? So let's just get into this next item on the agenda here. So Terrence, is there a difference between sex and gender?
Definitely. So sex is just your biological attributes, your biological makeup, so your genitals basically. And gender is more of a term that is culturally dependent, and it just describes a set of behaviors that a person portrays. And this is dependent on each society. So what they deem masculine and what they deem feminine, and to what degree, which is what makes it a spectrum. Now, to tie in with the last few things James said, the American Psychiatric Association considers gender dysphoria as a mental disorder only if it causes distress to a person. It is very possible to be transgender and not be classified to have a mental disorder, once it does not cause significant distress to a person's life. And the World Health Organization, as late as 2018, reclassified it from a mental issue into an issue of sexual incongruence. And to say that because sex and gender, because the definitions I said are definitions, there's really no arguing with them. Anything else said would simply just be factually wrong, because those are the definitions of sex and gender. Gender isn't just science and biology. Gender also incorporates sociology and culture and a lot more.
Okay, thank you. James, chime in on that.
Yes, no, I think that what he said is thank you, Terrence, because it's very coherent in how you said it. It was very easy to understand, and I think that the viewing body would understand what you said. Now, I would like to make an interesting point that there was never a difference between sex and gender until a psychologist and father of the gender identity theory, his name is John William Murray. He's a native to New Zealand, but he later went to America to do more of this sort of studying on gender identity theory, etc. in the 1950s. And he began to claim that the two were different for all exactly the same reasons that Terrence said. Okay, so he's a big father of this theory. Now, I would like to just make a side note about money. Okay,
Make sure I get something correct. You said that only in the 1950s. What? Say that again. What exactly?
Yes, he began this work in the 1950s. Okay, on the gender identity theory that the gender and sex are different. That gender is a social construct. That there's sociology involved, and all of the facts that the same things that Terrence just said.
So
everything that
you're saying that only in the 1950s sex and gender became separate.
Yes, he was the first person to be. Let me finish. This is true.
Go forward. If
it is true, it is true. You can look it up. Check him out.
Journals or something, right?
Let me hear what you're saying.
You mean like in scientific journals?
Yeah, he is one of the first people to have ever actually in academia to have made this claim, and that from this guy, this has gotten universally accepted by people. For example, the World Health Organization. Okay.
Continue.
Right. So this guy, his name is John William Money. I would like to just say a side note about John William Money. He made a young boy, David Reimner is his name. Anybody, you can check this. This is a very easy to do fact check here. He made this young fella undergo a sex reassignment surgery. He was born a man, and he made him cut off his penis, made an artificial vagina, etc. Money then had Reimer and his own brother, Reimer's brother, engage in homosexual activities. Well, they would not be considered homosexual activities because Reimer had this fella engage in a sex change, so technically it would not be homosexual, but they were still brothers. And while he photographed, they engaged in these activities for purpose of his research. Later, Reimer and his brother both committed suicide. Okay, there's a side note about this guy. I would like to make another note. Money, the one who was really behind this theory and who pushed it in academia to normalize it, he has many quotes about pedophilia, which he says is nothing but pure love. Here's one of them. Quote, "If I were to see a case of a boy aged 10 or 11 who's intensely erotically attracted towards a man in maybe his 20s or even 30s, if the relationship is totally mutual and the bonding is genuinely totally mutual, I would not call it pathological in any way." End quote. The reality is, gender is not a social construct. We do not invent our reality. We actually understand reality. It is outside. Gender is not something that we just decide and that is just on the whim of our can be male. One day we wake up, we can be female. I cannot now decide my gender here. Or for example, if tomorrow Trinidad decided that all men are going to war, I could not write to the government and say, "Sorry, sir, I'm male, not going to war." We construct reality. This is why the LGBTQ community is so dangerous, because it says that what you identify as what you believe you are, and that you could just form a reality in your mind. And this is why it leads to so many suicide, despite the fact that they have much more acceptance in the LGBTQ community to the first world, quote unquote, the suicide rates continue to rise, not fall, not fall. This is
Okay.
the reality, because they.
So, as somebody who is in the community, all as far as I'm aware, all of us, the hosts and yourself, are not part of the LGBT community. Terrence, are the reasons that James has put forward, well, you probably don't agree with them, but can you provide some counter to what he has said just now?
Well, the evidence provided is anecdotal at best. There's no large body of evidence or credible institution or organization that would support what he's saying. There is just I mean, if we aren't trusting the professionals who studied for years and more than a decade of their life and spent billions of dollars in high level, high quality research on large populations, then what really should we believe? There's just no evidence to support what is being said here.
Okay, so my apologies to anyone who thinks that I know people say that I supposed to be mediating the debate and I was challenging James a bit there, but it's because we're not having a debate here, people. It is a discussion, and I just kind of jumped in there because I was kind of confused as to why we would say that in the 1950s was the first time that there would have been a difference between sex and gender, when there have been so many instances of multiple genders in cultures over time, as we said. But again, I guess it has to do with academia and with the term gender and the term sex and all that, which is, I could understand that. Let's see, you have anything to add there?
There's always been gender dysphoria throughout history. There's always been cases where somebody had a difference in their perception of what they were and what they really were, and that is recorded throughout history. But what I was saying, as you said, and as we clarified already, is that this guy was the first to normalize the idea that it is actually acceptable to believe that you can form your own gender based on your own perception of reality. And that therefore gender and sex was different, because you need to explain that, you need to separate gender and sex to make this seem logical, because you cannot just by the thought of your mind change your biological nature.
Normalize it. I would think that he'd be the first person to observe certain things about it and comment on it from a scientific perspective, because it's like saying that everything that a scientific mind speaks about, that they have invented or they have normalized. I mean, what they have done, they have observed certain things that have probably been happening since time immemorial, and then they posit what they think is the scene there now. And I see that you brought up pedophilia, which is I know a lot of people like to tack homosexuality and gender dysphoria and to pedophilia, which is not something that I would like to do, because of the fact that they seem to be very separate in terms of consent. But anyway, let's see, you have anything to add right now, because we need to hear you. We didn't hear you in a bit.
So I also want to just keep the conversation going, because I'm very interested in terms of, I'm learning a lot, you know what I mean, today, in terms of understanding the different perspectives from both our guests and whatnot. And before we continue along the gender versus sex discussion, which I do have a specific position and scientific papers to illustrate, I want to take us back just a little, James, in particular, when you were talking about the grounds of morality, and you pegged it against Plato and ancient Greeks in terms of how they would have interpreted certain morality and how they would have viewed that sort of universal truth. And I want to underpin that on just the little that I know, which is that a lot of homosexuality would have been practiced in ancient Greece. You had Herodotus, Plato, Xenophon, Athenaeus, were all big advocates of it, and Sappho, in the time of Sappho. And it was so common that they actually had a name, they came up with a name of it actually called pederasty. So my understanding is that it was a commonly practiced thing at that time. So perhaps if you could just give a little more clarity in
Yes.
terms of, even if you want to focus specifically on Plato and what himself and Aristotle or Galileo or any of these people, their perspective of how you underpin that differentiation of morality and that determination.
Yes, definitely. I would like to just you said a very good point that uh is very valid. That it was occurring heavily in Greece, but in the time, this is again, this is not a justifiable way to say, hey, it's been going on in ancient Greece. It was going on time of Plato and Aristotle, and those are two guys that James said he admires or whatever. Therefore, it would seem okay, because also in ancient Greece going on was, you would not find it uncommon that somebody had killed somebody, for example. I mean, it was these this is the times that they lived in. So what I was saying is not so much that because they had a good understanding of morality, this is what we should think too. It was just that the Greeks, whilst their empire was very much expanding, and whilst they observed many different cultures through the travel that they engaged in, they noticed, and we noticed today too, that there is always a very similar morality that is sort of proves that there is some sort of a universal law that everybody in their heart agrees with, despite how much Terrence and I disagree with each other, or anybody else here that might disagree with me. Nobody in this is going to disagree that murder is wrong. There's certain things that we all universally agree on. There's a morality above, and it doesn't matter what religion we belong to. In fact, our religions would be probably very united in a certain set of these morals that I speak of. But I don't really want to talk about religion. I'm not here to talk about religion. I do enjoy talking about religion and politics, but this is a different debate. That's for a different time. That's not the right place. But this is what I was essentially showing, that in the time of ancient Greece, they observed that the laws that form nations, counter to what they thought, was not from the own construction of their imagination on what they believed to be good and bad, but it was
Who's
on what
they?
the lawmakers, the society.
Okay.
But instead, they found that when they go to other nations, it was that people were actually understanding nature, seeing reality, and forming laws that were in union with reality. It was not just arbitrary, random things. It was, there seemed to be laws that exist that they were just discovering, not inventing. That's what I wanted to say.
Okay. Terrence, what do you think about that?
Well, to be honest, from that, I'm not really getting a solid reasoning why homosexuality should be considered wrong, and those views should be used to guide, policies and laws. It sounds more
Yeah.
of like a personal opinion
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
really should not apply to the public at large.
Yeah, because James, you keep bringing up this thing that everybody should in their heart know something, like, like we have hundreds of thousands of homosexuals all over the planet, bro. You know what I mean?
And
I'm
hundreds of thousands of murderers,
yeah,
of thieves.
but
It doesn't mean that
wait,
it's okay.
how can you say that something which two people consent to is the same thing as somebody murdering somebody? I don't understand the link.
No, I never said it's the same as murdering. I'm just saying that you can't,
You're murdering all the time. You're bringing it up
because
over and
because it's something that we all understand is wrong. That's the main point. So you can't,
right,
you can't justify that murdering is right by saying that there are thousands of murderers, and you know that. That's why I bring it up.
right,
But you try to justify the existence that homosexuality, okay, because there are so many homosexuals. So you would not use this logic if it was applied to something you really believe was wrong. That's
no,
why I bring
Yeah.
it up.
I can't, yeah, I don't want to say anything there because I'll just be
Yeah.
circles.
Yeah.
So
No,
that-
I think and thanks James and Terrence for that. I think we've carried that discussion to the point where we'll probably need another episode to then focus specifically on that, which is how we approach it in the Heights Room here, guys. It's that when you start to unpack a main topic, you would see certain subtopics start to crop up, and depending on how large those subtopics are, another episode we will focus specifically on that. So in my mind, I think I'm fairly clear in terms of where you all stand in terms of the morality concern. So bringing it back now to the current topic we're talking about in terms of gender versus sex, and the idea of gender dysphoria. All right. So this has to do with the concept of people seeing transgender as being a disorder, and that's the hypothesis being assessed. Now, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the most recent one, DSM-5, which I think, James, you would have referenced a little earlier, would have now actually moved the definition of gender identity disorder from 2013 to now define gender dysphoria. And gender dysphoria, they basically identify as the clinically significant distress a person undergoes when their gender identity does not align with their sex assigned at birth. All right, so there's quite a few things to unpack even there. Let's start with the concept of sex assigned at birth, which seems to have quite a few different interpretations and so on. Starting with you, James, what do you interpret as sex assigned at birth? Is it as simple as a doctor looking at anatomist genitalia and saying male or female, and that's it?
Of course. Now I know what's coming already. I know that the counter argument is going to be that they are anomalies to the natural to the genitalia, that they are going to be some people who are born with maybe it's like a mix, or they do have these anomalies, but we call them anomalies, just like people with 12 fingers. We don't teach kids in school that some people have. We don't say humans have 10 fingers, count with me, 1 2 3 4. We say that. We don't go on to say humans have 10 fingers, but some have 12, some have 13, some have 11. We don't account the anomalies and the oddities as the natural generalized scientific reality. The scientific reality is that you're either born, generally speaking, male or female, and it's very easily distinguishable between the two. You don't need to be a medical practitioner to do it, and they've been doing it forever.
Yeah, Terrence?
Oh, hi. So yes, I do agree that you could tell if somebody is male or female by looking at their genitals, because that is what sex is. I wasn't planning to say anything about intersex people at all. That is what sex is, but that is not what gender is, as we said before. And I just want to correct you a little bit. The American Psychiatric Association, which is what we use here, the DSM-5,
Yes.
considers gender dysphoria as a mental disorder if it causes stress or impairment to someone's life. And that impairment is usually due to discrimination or societal non-acceptance. And as such, the treatment or what is shown to improve the outcome of people with this disorder is having a strong support system, having an accepting environment, and even gender reassignment surgery or hormonal therapy. Those are shown to give better outcomes to people suffering. So the anecdotal evidence of people with gender reassignment surgery committing suicide, and so that's not proven. That's not what the evidence says, the large evidence. And then the World Health Organization in 2018 said, okay, it is not a mental issue, it is sexual disorder. But even so, we use the DSM-5 here, and even it being categorized as a mental disorder, it's only due to mostly the discrimination faced, that which impairs the functioning of the person, and the therapy is still the transition and support from society and the environment around the person.
So Terrence,
Okay.
I want a second,
Yeah.
Leslie. Terrence, so I have it in my head, clarify what you're saying. Is it that you're saying that James mentioned that there are a lot of suicides, it's a negative effect mentally, things like that? You are someone in the community, if I am understanding you correctly, is it that these suicidal rates and the mental anguish that these people face is due to societal pressures and homophobia?
Yeah, definitely. Not as a result of transition therapy. It's as a result of societal attitudes towards people and discrimination.
Terrence, as a person who has, well, is transitioning or has transitioned, I know you're going through hormone therapy and all of that, right? Can you tell us a little bit about your journey as a person who has taken that step in your life? A bit like when, like, I'll just bring some context to this conversation, because it's not very often that people have these conversations where, you know, we're talking about trans people and there's someone who is trans in the panel, as well as someone who is opposed to them in the panel. So we still need to get a little bit of context as to the actual experience of it. So can you give us a little insight there?
Well, currently I'm on hormonal therapy. I'm on testosterone, and personally, this is the happiest and most functional I have ever been in my life.
You're a med student, right? Or final year?
Yeah, a final year med student. Yeah, this is the happiest I've ever been. This is the highest my self-esteem has ever been, and I'm lucky enough to have supportive people around me, which gives me a strong base and helps me to be resilient. And this is what is leading to the betterment of my mental state. Before transition, I was very depressed. My self-esteem was very low. I was passively suicidal, to be honest. And since being on hormones, I really haven't really thought about suicide since, to be honest. I've been I've been given like a new love for life again, like, to be honest. But I'm just one person, so I could be considered anecdotal evidence. But the studies show that people who undergo this therapy on a large scale, it helps them, and they are less likely to commit suicide and so on.
I hear you.
So before you come in, James, let me just give something to allow you to respond to. Let me just make sure I'm clear. Terrence, are you saying then that gender dysphoria is a mental disorder or is not a mental disorder?
Well, gender dysphoria is the name of the mental disorder, and in order for that to be diagnosed, there must be distress to a person. So what I'm saying is, somebody could have a gender that's different to their sex. They could be transgender, but if they're not necessarily experiencing any problems in their functioning, then it's not a mental disorder.
Okay. So right, and at least just from the little research that I would have done, which is not much, this psychology professor out of Harvard University, Darrell Hill, would have actually said something similar, but which is that it's not a mental disorder, and that it's actually a diagnostic criteria that reflects the psychological stress that someone would go through, that they will use to then diagnose the person. But I'm getting slightly unclear in terms of mental disorder or not. So perhaps, James, maybe you could lend some clarity before we come back to Terrence.
Yeah, like I said, the general mainstream thought pertaining to how we view gender dysphoria started to change in 1950s, mainly with this guy, John William Murray, psychologist, famous guy. Now we use Terrence as anecdotal evidence. Terrence, I'm happy that you're not thinking about committing suicide. I'm happy that you are happier and that you're not depressed. I don't want that for anybody. I don't wish that for anybody by any means at all. But just as he is, an anecdotal example, and his claim was first that the stress is caused by discrimination. Firstly, the countries that are most accepting to homosexuality and to the LGBTQ community, transsexuals, etc., they have the highest rates of suicide for those communities. The ones that have the most open laws, the ones that have the most open promotion, the ones that have they're teaching the children that they're so open about it. Suicide numbers are not falling. They have the most transitioners, everything, and it's not going down. So clearly something is going on. But just as he's anecdotal evidence, there's also anecdotal evidence in this same case of David Reimer, who John Money would have studied. He underwent the sex change at a very young age. So if we're saying gender is a social construct, or it's something that you decide on, or whatever it is, he underwent his reassignment surgery at a very young age, and he was fully fully female, so to speak, in the context of all that he had done to his body and all of the hormones he had taken and all of the stuff he had done. And he committed suicide later on in his life as soon as he realized, wait, I feel like I'm a boy. And he asked his parents, and they told him, and days later he committed suicide. So the anecdotal evidence on one case is not really the best way to move the discussion, I think, because I can pull out many other anecdotal stories of many other transgender people who committed suicide, who are retransitioning. There's so many different stories online about retransitioning people, but the discrimination, it cannot be the reason why the suicide is happening, because in the most open countries to LGBTQ ideas, where there's like a 70% of the general population agreeing with them, they're still committing suicide at exponential rates. It's not going down.
Okay, Terrence?
Yeah, so about the point where you were kind of mixed about whether it was a mental disorder or not. I thought of a better way to explain it to you.
Sure.
So say somebody goes through a traumatic event, right? And say they came close to being murdered or something, for example. And say as a result of that, they develop PTSD, which is a mental disorder. You get where I'm going with this? That is a result of the trauma. So gender dysphoria is kind of like a result of the discrimination that people face and so on. And I'm not sure where those statistics come from, saying that acceptance in countries with acceptance, there's still higher rates of suicide. I don't think that I just don't think that's true. I think the studies show something completely different, in that like I said, a stronger environment of support, a stronger supportive environment, it leads to better outcomes. These studies do show that. And then this is not anecdotal evidence. This is high quality evidence-based, peer-reviewed studies show that the factors that lead to a better outcome is having a supportive environment, hormonal transition, and gender reassignment surgery.
So before I allow James to respond to that, let me just add that in 2015, there was a nationwide U.S. transgender survey in the U.S. Herman, Brown, and Haas, who actually looked at exactly what you were talking about, James. And they said that respondents who experienced discrimination, were victims of violence, were more likely to report suicide thoughts and attempts. Respondents who experienced family rejection were also more likely to report attempted suicide. And access to gender-affirming medical care is associated with lower prevalence of suicide. 98% of respondents who had experienced 4 instances of discrimination and violence in the past years thought about suicide. So what this study is suggesting, and this is across the US, where many would think are fairly open in some of their some of their laws in terms of acceptance of LGBTQ. They're saying 98% of respondents, are linking discrimination and violence to thoughts about suicide. So they are scientifically determining that there is a connection between the two. So is it that you have seen some scientific evidence that suggests something slightly different?
Yeah, I'm a little bit familiar with the study that you
Great,
mentioned.
perfect. Yes,
if I could just make a little bit of a comment on it, if you look
Sure.
at the way in which they come to the conclusions, it is by firstly they ask the question, whether or not you would have had those suicidal thoughts and etc. Right? Correct me. That's more or less what you just read out,
Yes,
right?
yes,
That these people had suicidal thoughts, and what was the other?
Because of the pressure. So they're saying exactly what we're discussing with gender dysmorphia, that essentially that this extra pressure that comes from society as a result of them having this concern about their gender and whatnot leads to these suicidal thoughts and whatnot. So they're basically establishing a connection between the two. So in my mind, so what they're connecting is the pressure. And by connecting the pressures come from all of, it have legal pressures, it have societal pressures. So all of that, so they're saying from a scientific basis, there's a connection between the two. But I'm saying, go ahead.
The scientific basis would be the pool, and it's
right.
It's a very complex study. This one that you say.
Agree.
It's critiqued on both sides. It's used, for example, as a weapon against the LGBT movement. I've seen it used because people will say, well, they asked the question to the LGBTQ people who it's likely that they have already faced this desire for this depression, and also they have probably faced or not, we don't know, the discrimination that they talk about. Okay, so it is better. I mean, I'm not disregarding what this study is saying, and perhaps there's truth to what it says, but I think the general easier judgment could be made by simply looking at the overall number of suicides each year annually.
Okay, thanks a lot for James. Moving on to another item here. Yeah, let's see if we can move on.
Let's move on. We're getting
Hungary's. You're getting hungry there, or? Hungary's parliament passed legislation that bans the dissemination of content in schools deemed to promote homosexuality and transgender issues. The ruling party tacked the proposal banning schools' talks on LGBTQ issues to a separate, widely backed bill that strictly penalizes pedophilia, making it much harder for opponents to vote against it. So pretty much what you're looking at here is, limiting the amount of material coming your way of children going into schools, educating them about, like, let's say, when you have sex education, same-sex education and that kind of thing. Do you think that children should be privy to information and education that is inclusive of LGBTQ issues? Let's just hear from Terrence first on this.
Yes, definitely, because they should be educated on especially safe sex practices, because of the higher prevalence of HIV and AIDS in the MSM community and in MTF trans people. It is just safer. It will lead to better outcomes if they have access to proper sex education that includes them. And that is just simply, that is saving lives, because they'll have better outcomes in the long run. That giving them that access to that education is saving lives. And pedophilia, as we mentioned before, is quite different from homosexuality. It shouldn't be anywhere near homosexuality, because children can't give consent, and it shouldn't be included along with homosexuality at all.
Okay, James?
Well, I just want to respond to the last thing he said. You can see this. This is actually a tweet that I screenshotted the other day. It says, "Pedophilia is a sexual orientation. You bigots." All right. So I mean this, and a lot of rainbow flags in between. I'm not gonna say anymore. This is just the last thing I say on that. But the point on the sexual education for children. The fact of it is that when we talk about sexual education of maybe 10 years ago or 20 years ago, it was more or less how to have sex using contraception. The fact of the matter is that despite the introduction of contraceptives and the wide acceptance of contraceptives, sexually transmitted diseases are rising, not falling. This is obvious because the more sex you have, the more likely you are to contract a sexually transmittable disease, and contraceptives are not 100% accurate at stopping these diseases. So sexually transmitted diseases will not decrease if we teach children as young as possible to have sex using these contraceptives. Okay. And obviously, as a child, as an inquisitive little individual at the age of 10 and 11 and even younger, you are taught about something, you will instantly investigate. This is obvious thing. So I think that it should either be that we revise what we mean by sexual education on a general level. But this is talking about 20 years ago sexual education. People today in the US especially are being taught in schools the most disturbing things when you read about it at age 6, 7, and 8. How to use dildos, how to apply butt plugs, how to engage in oral sex, how to masturbate. These things that innocent little children, should we really be teaching them these things? And with regard to that, this thing in Hungary that took place with the pinning of the bill that penalizes pedophilia, it's not true that it was used as a tactic to ensure that there was no opposition to the anti-LGBTQ law legislation that they wanted to pass, because everybody supported that same LGBTQ. A large majority supported the anti-LGBTQ decision, and a large percent of the population as well. So it's not really fair to frame the question as if they use a tactic to get the thing normalized when that's not really truly what occurred.
Okay. Noted. Moving on. This one is a lot of people are bringing up something related to like things like this in the chat. So here it is. Recently, there was a situation where 21-year-old Tongan American weightlifter Nini Manuma would have been competing at her first Olympics in Tokyo next month, but missed out when New Zealand's transgender athlete Laurel Hubbard got the last female spot allocated to the Oceania region in her weight category. So what we have here is that people from different nations in the same region are competing in the same category, but one would have been born female and the other would have been a transitioned female. And what are your thoughts on this, Terrence?
Okay, so the International Olympic Committee has a set of criteria that transgender, specifically male to female transgender athletes, need to meet in order to compete. So this criteria would be that they have to have their identity cleared for at least 4 years. They need to reach a certain level of serum testosterone, less than 10 for at least a year, and during the competition to try to reverse their biological advantages. Now, I agree that in light of the frequency of transgender women being so successful in sports, that this criteria could be revised. Either the time period that they have to maintain the testosterone level for could be longer, or the level could be lower if possible. I don't know.
So
That's my non-biased view, and it could the lower level of testosterone would lessen a lot of the biological advantages, but what it can't reverse is height. And whether or not that is an advantage is based on the sport. That is very sport specific. In some sports, it might be a disadvantage, and in some sports, it might be an advantage. So that is my non-biased view.
Okay, I could agree with that, because it does seem. So would you say then that you think that it could seem a bit unfair?
Yes, because the level that transgender women have to maintain is less than 10. And the levels that a cisgender woman, the normal levels would be about 0.12 to, let's say, like a little less than to like 1.8 or something, right? And that's a lot less. But just using therapy to transition, it's hard and sometimes dangerous to get a biological male's testosterone so low. So it could even be considered unethical to try to bring somebody's testosterone that low. So I do agree that the criteria should be revised, and maybe they could investigate further into what could work. But yeah, I do agree there's a degree of unfairness there.
James?
What we see with transgender people trying to participate in the sport that they do not biologically agree with, or they were not biologically given at birth with, is another example of the LGBTQ community's hypocrisy. Because at one instance they will argue to legitimize their movement that the sex and the gender, the XY or the XX chromosomes, etc., there's no difference. There is a difference. Sorry, that the gender is just what's in your mind, and biologically there is no there's something separate. So you don't need to worry about your biological stuff. Gender is what's up here in this social, psychological, and sociological world. And then on the other hand, you have them there cheering with their rainbow flags that they should be partaking in sports, that the very purpose of these sports is to test the biological ability of the individuals. So at one instance they say that the biology is unchanging, because that's not their point. They're saying sex is biological, not changing. And then on the other they're saying that, wait, it is changing, and if I identify as a woman with my gender, which is separate to my sex, now my sex must agree with that, and now I must be in these sports. The women's weightlifting world records being broken by very compete in male sport professionally at all, because they would not class with men in any way whatsoever, because males and females are very different with different breeds.
Well, okay, it's different species.
That's all from
me. Mazum kind of thing. Yeah, okay. I hear you. So would you say, Terrence, that in a way, that is it because of the fact that there's that binary setting for so many things in life, right? That because of the heteronormativity which exists, and so on, that there is this confusion. Because maybe if there wasn't that thing that you had to be either male or female, then you might have had more categories for people to compete in and all of that. Maybe did you think that could have been a possibility if we ever could have reached to that point, that they didn't have to just have two categories for the athletes?
Yeah, I agree with that. It is a very complicated thing, and I have thought about the possibilities of other categories before for inclusion, but obviously that wouldn't make as much money, so that doesn't make sense from a business point of view.
Exactly.
But just to address something James said, what was that?
Did we tell the audience trainer as well as yet? I can't remember, because I was so in and out in the earlier parts.
You're breaking up a little bit for me.
Okay. All right. My bad. You carry on then.
Yeah. Transgender men don't have any advantages over cisgender men in sport whatsoever. None at all.
Right.
The only advantage would probably be in sports where being shorter would be an advantage because they are more stable and they have a better center of gravity, a more stable center of gravity, and so on, like the closer to ground. So I think yes, the criteria is a complicated topic, and the criteria as it stands now is a bit unfair and could be revised. And I think the fact that I think that kind of shows out Jim's point that the LGBT community is biased, because I'm transgender myself and I'm giving you an unbiased view on this topic. I agree that it's kind of unfair, and yeah.
Okay, great.
No, fair point. I just want to say that is a fair and a good point on Terrence's behalf, that he does not hold the view of a large percent of the LGBTQ lobby, so to speak, that is really rallying legally behind getting women in men's tennis and men in women's tennis on the basis that they change their gender. You know, if I woke up tomorrow, I mean, and Terrence already shared sympathy with this view, and I decided that I'm a female, I could potentially make the female weightlifting team for Trinidad and Tobago. And should I do that? Should I deprive somebody who's been training their entire life, who's a biological female, really a female? And like Terrence said, he's sympathetic towards that view, which is very good and very honest of him. But it is just not the view of the general LGBTQ lobby, which is fighting in court, etc., for these things to change.
Okay, let's see. Let me hear something there.
So what I would say is, okay, I heard Terrence's perspective and James' perspective, but I would like to just drop some of the science that exists. As I say, this is just for someone like me who's from the outside and just looking at it probably over the past week or so. And this is just what the studies say. All right. So for the IOC, as Terrence said, which is correct, in 2015, they allowed trans participants, if their testosterone levels remain below a threshold of 10 moles per liter of blood. All right. You have World Athletics, who have a much stricter threshold, which is 5 nanomoles per liter. You also have French rugby, which has the same 5 nanomoles per liter. And they would have actually gone ahead and commissioned several studies to investigate exactly what we're talking about in terms of do trans athletes actually have advantages, statistically significant advantage on people. And the three main athletes that come into contention is Laurel Hubb, Caster Semenya, and most recently Cici Telfer. All right. Cici Telfer was recently banned by the not banned, but actually she wasn't allowed to compete in these US trials at certain distances because of the thresholds that they have. So the study done by Joanna Harper actually said that trans women get slower. So this is male to female, right? Trans women actually get slower and weaker after transition. Their ability to recover from hard training is reduced. That's a result of her study. You also have one from Carol Garber that says that there are inefficient evidence to suggest trans athletes has an unfair advantage over a cis person. So he's not saying that that is not the case. What they're saying is that there's insufficient evidence in order to illustrate that. Another study actually went on to say the bottom line is that a trans woman is not a man physiologically or psychologically, and that trans women have lower levels of hemoglobin, impairing aerobic performance. So the reality is that what we have is a situation of three different studies being done, where it's basically suggesting that there is insufficient evidence to come up to that scientific conclusion. Now, what I want to put out is that, as I say, that's just what I saw just from Google. I don't know if Google sending me in a certain direction, which is a possibility as well. So I just want to come to, let me start with James, just on comments on that. I know you dropped out. Hopefully you were able to hear some of what I was saying.
I got most of what you're saying. The first comment I would like to say on that is that I don't think that anybody on planet Earth really and truly needs a scientific paper to tell them that the difference in men's sports and women's sports at the level of competition is drastically different. Okay, it's like there was an ESPN commentator. It was a very famous story because it turned into a whole shitstorm online when he basically said, you know, Serena Williams is really good at tennis, but she wouldn't make it in college tennis against guys. You know, she's not compete because somebody said she would beat most of the guys, and he responded with that.
Serena Williams.
Yeah, and it was a total,
Okay.
it was a total shitstorm. But at the end of the day, it's not to discount what Serena is and how much of a amazing athlete she is. But that's for where she is. You can't compare her. It's just not right. That's what that guy was trying to say. In that he said it in a provocative way, but what he was trying to say is it's not fair to put her in the same category as the guys, because at the end of the day you're going to discredit all of the hard work she's done and all of the titles she's rightfully earned in her respective place in sports. There is that if you look at sports and if you put the top men and the top women to play against each other at any physical sport, you're going to see a very drastic difference at levels. You know, just the other day, the US women's team, the same team that was demanding same pay as the men's team and stuff, they were defeated by, I think it was like the under 19 US male squad, something like that, by like 8 goals. So it was crazy. I remember it. I could be wrong in how much goals exactly when it was or what age group of boys it was, but it was a very inferior team of boys that defeated the US girls. And so I don't really need scientific paper to tell me or to tell anyone that there's a difference. I think it's very natural that we would see it in the level of competition between men and women. And it's not to say one gender is superior. It's not to be sexist. It's to say that there's a difference, and that we need to accept that and appreciate it for what it is. And comparing the two is just unfair to one, and that would be real sexism. To try to put, if you try to remove the gender barrier in sports, we wouldn't get to see the likes of a Serena Williams or this new young girl who's really amazing to watch at tennis. I enjoy watching tennis. I just can't remember her name, but and I don't want to butcher it. Yes, that's it. So I would hate to never have been able to be graced to watch these tennis players play tennis because they try to remove gender as though it didn't exist. It exists, and that's why we have women's sports. That's why we have men's sports.
Fair enough,
sure.
Jay. Fair enough.
Terrence?
So, anything to topic quickly on the sports angle?
Yeah, so as I was saying before, there really are no advantages that trans men have in sports. And yes, there's a drastic difference between biological men and women in sports, but there's also a very drastic effect of hormone therapy and anybody undergoing that. So trans women undergoing hormonal therapy, they are going to have decreased muscle mass, decreased bone density, decreased hemoglobin, decreased strength, speed, agility, aggressiveness, everything. Trans men are going to have more aggression, more muscle mass, but less bone density. You know, they have more hemoglobin. The biological changes are there when the hormonal therapy is undergone, right? The biological changes are there. Like I said, height is really the only thing that can't be changed with hormones. And I see you had these studies that said, okay, well, there's no evidence to suggest there's an advantage, right? Well, I think there probably could be some more studies into the exact length of time and the level of testosterone that the criteria should entail. But and basically it should be more sports specific. That's what I think. And yeah, that's my view. And this is, I won't say this based on no scientific paper, or this is based on evidence.
Yeah.
All right. Here, you hear that?
I would say one thing that I disagree with you a little bit there on, Terrence, is that hormones can't increase height. A little Lionel Messi, I think, will disagree with you there when he was a midget and Barcelona put him on HGH and he
Barcelona
then
pumped that. They pumped that.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. So
estrogen can't change height then.
All right, so we know
Leo still very short, Leslie.
We're running into the 2 hour mark, and I want to let you all know something, right? This has been by far the biggest audience we have had for this this podcast.
Big
right?
up the guests.
It just goes to show you. It just goes to show you how much this topic is an important topic to our society. Whether it be that whichever side you are on, it's a really, really important topic because this is like. It's crazy. All right, so I just want to finish off with some closing questions and some closing remarks. So lastly, I want to ask Terrence, if you could briefly answer and I know it's kind of hard to go brief on this, but as a person belonging to the LGBTQ plus community, what are some of the challenges you have faced in your dealings with wider society?
Well, first off, I get threats, violent threats, including death threats all the time. I face a lot of discrimination in education, in my normal life, going to any kind of store, making any kind of purchases. I have had low self-esteem due to bullying since high school, and general non-acceptance of the people around me. And yeah, and briefly, that's it.
Okay, I hear you. James, as a person who believes in, let's say, heteronormativity, if you want to call it that, right? What challenges have you personally faced due to the actions of the LGBTQ plus community?
Well, personally, what exactly are you asking? If I have experienced any sort of discrimination or anything,
like discrimination or like something that you saw that set put you off, rub you the wrong way, something you see in the news, like maybe even the ruling that you saw, and you're like this this affects me negatively in a big way now.
Well, so far, thank God, because Trinidad is very much opposed to the LGBTQ community. I have not experienced any discrimination because of or by the LGBTQ community directly. I have had many occasions where in my university days I have tried to discuss the topic with people who are of that community, and the things that they called me, my race, the things like that, I would not repeat, and I would not wish that anybody would,
and that's in UE?
Call that. And not in UE, but during that period of time.
Okay.
I would like to say though that discrimination does exist in Trinidad and Tobago against white people. That is a real thing, and people say, well, white people have no struggle, so they don't take it on much. But there's very daily. There's a lot of daily discrimination that takes place for white people. For example, if I'm traveling, there's many occasions where the drivers would refuse to give you change. If you have 100, they don't give you change. You go to a store on Charlotte Street. You go to a store in Charlotte Street, you ask the price of the items, and they tell you things like, well, everything was half price yesterday. And you say, that's impossible. Come on, all these price tags. They tell you, no. Well, you can pay the price. These are things, these are real things that happen. And like I said, it was very early in the comments that the more you speak as a white person, everybody assumes you come from a very, very privileged position, and and they attack you for your race. And it's not right. It doesn't really affect me. It doesn't affect me. The comments don't affect me, because I think, thank God, in Trinidad we don't take those things too much to heart. If somebody calls me, hey, white boy, whatever, or hey, this, that, even if it's it's more offensive. It's not. It's no harm, no foul to me. It doesn't bother me. I don't.
Yeah,
I don't see myself as a little victim or anything like that.
Yeah, I hear you, and I would agree with that, because because in a way, whites in Trinidad are a minority, so you get that treatment in a way, like a minority, and that's really sad. But you said something that say thank God, Trinidad is really opposed to homosexuality and so on. So you don't have to face anything. But do you think that Trinidad? So do you think that that is okay? So Trinidad as a society, would you agree that we have that a lot of our norms as a society, like the way we look at issues like politics, the way we look at issues like race, the way we look at issues like gender relations, like feminism, the way we look at the role of women in society and thing. Would you say that Trinidad is a place where those beliefs that we have are good, that we in a good place away from LGBTQ stuff? Would you say we are in a good place? Trinidad is in a real good place right now, where our national consensus and our status quo is really, really top of the line?
There are certain we oppose generally speaking the ideas of the LGBTQ community on the ground level. Trinidad and Tobago does. This is true democratically, but this is no means right, and this doesn't give right to those individuals who make up the society, who think, for example, we should kill people who are of LGBTQ tendencies, or who think that simply having those tendencies makes you a legitimate victim of punishment or something like this. This is not, we can't be okay with this. I don't say that in any way, but do I think that we generally oppose the LGBTQ community? Yes. Do I think we are in a good position to move forward opposing? From an opposing perspective, I do not think we are in a good position, because if you look at the media in Trinidad and Tobago and the government, we run our country and we run our press based on the UN agenda for each year or for each decade. So the UN agenda for 2030 or whatever it is, that is the current agenda, is what. And I worked with the Newsday for a couple months. I chose not to continue. And this is a very common theme. You use these UN agenda to compare everything going on in society as either it is good or it is bad. So everything that they are making the Trinis perceive from the media's perspective is based on what the UN perceives, how they perceive it. So, and the government is very much favorable towards this too, because we get a lot of financial aid from UN related countries, etc. So this is not a good position to be in, and I do think that we will see negative repercussions of being mimics or dummies to the UN.
Yeah, well, what I was really trying to get at is that like I would say that the fact that we are opposed to LGBTQ people is not different to the fact that we are very racist. Like the same thing you were talking about, how they move racist towards you. I would think that is just like commonplace, because are you all hearing me good?
Say that.
Yeah, I would say that is
break up. Good.
Yeah, I was just trying to establish that I think that that the fact that we are homophobic as a country, pretty much, we are, because being opposed to it is just being, in my books, being homophobic. And we are homophobic in the same way we are racist, in the same way we have tribal politics, in the same way that we look down on females and their role in society. And that's what I'm trying to get at. I think that the way, so you're picking that one thing out of our society and saying, I find it, it's kind of interesting that that's one thing, like, thank Lord for that. But then everything else is just like, because everything else, as I could see, I put them in the same category. It's just kind of messed up. That's what I was trying to get at. But I understand what you're saying about the UN agenda and all of that,
If I might just say something, it is a categorization that you did with all of the different points. And if you do that, but there really is no real, logical way that we could say all of these things are related, that where people are against homosexuals because they're racist.
Yeah,
people are against, you know what I mean?
Say it's ignorance. I would say it's ignorance. Like all of them have one thing in common: ignorance. That's what I would say.
You could be of that opinion, but it's very hard, if you understand what I mean, to intellectually argue that, well, because people have tribal politics in Trinidad, and because people, you know, are racist or whatever, or may tend to a certain race, they are homophobic. I mean, I wouldn't try to argue that, because it means judging a lot of the intentions of individual people. I wouldn't judge it like that. I would just say on a general level, we do not favor LGBT ideas.
I hear you, bro. I hear you. Terrence, we're looking to wrap up now. Let's get some closing comments about, what you thought about today's episode and what you want to leave with our listeners, our viewers, before we wrap up. Some closing comments.
Well, I believe that I presented everything I said was backed up by evidence, a high level of evidence. And I believe that the LGBTQ plus community, we deserve our fundamental human rights, and we deserve laws and policies that protect us against discrimination and gives us the right to live freely.
Thank you, Terrence. James?
Well, my closing remarks would be, well, first of all, thanks guys for having me on. I appreciate the invite and the amount of time that I was allowed to have to voice my opinion. And also thanks to Terrence for coming on. No, that must not be easy. And even for me, it's always not easy talking about controversial things in the open, in a very polarized world right now, especially on social media. People can't take differing opinions. They get a little wacky. But anyway, I would just say that the simple basis of all of what I've had to say lies on refuting two principles that the LGBTQ community holds, and it's that gender is fluid, that people are what they think they are, that they can construct their own reality in their mind, and that two, any sexual act that is pleasing is morally good. So people can have sex with whomever as long as it is consensual, and love is love. It's a reason for it to be good. I would say that these are two not good principles that we should not base and make laws upon, because if we legally say that homosexuality is okay because love is love and it's consensual, who's to say that we will not use that same argument to make a lot of other things, the dangerous things, legal, on the premise that the person engaging in them loves it and it's consensual. And also, I just think that gender is not fluid, because when you look at reality, you don't see that you can change it by the whim of your imagination. And that's pretty much it for me. And thanks a lot, guys.
No problem, James. Shankarah, hit us something there.
Yes, one thing I will say, guys, is a big thank you to both our guests for coming on board. It's not easy to come on and discuss the way you discuss. You all did it really professionally. You brought your references, and you allowed the discussion to stay in the context of what we envisage in the Heights Room, which is intellectual reasoning. You know what I mean? Where I think everyone understands a lot better the two sides of the coin. We definitely will be looking to the next quarter for a repeat episode, but of course that will be much more focused now. We did identify many things throughout this episode that we could focus on more, the biological side of the conversation of transgender, separation between church and state, and the legal and human rights of freedom side of the discussion. So today, we really appreciate you guys coming on board and helping us unpack the broader context of the discussion. And the next time, we want to have more specific discussion. But a big thanks and shout outs to you guys and your network that would have come on and added to the views, to the comments. It really was a fantastic show. Thanks so much, guys.
Yeah,
well,
Shankarah,
thanks a lot for having me. I hope to be here again sometime and further the discussion.
Yeah, man. Taurean, the man behind the scenes, right? The Wizard of Oz. Talk to me. Yeah, you're mute. Yeah, you're mute.
A lot to unpack. Yeah, a lot of things I disagree with, some things I agree with. But to echo Leslie, thanks for coming on, gentlemen. This was a bit of an education for myself. Thank you to the folks in the comments. It wasn't too bad. I didn't have to ban anybody. My finger did hover over that button for a little bit, but it wasn't too bad. a little MFs and shut the fucks up and all that.
Jamak
Let's slide this side. But
Jamak said that he realized tonight that it have real
on both sides.
Both sides to intolerant, because at the end of the day, people, I always say that it could be whatever, it could still be an asshole, you know what I mean? So it could be on whatever side of whatever argument. So we could never forget that.
Apologies to those who think this conversation was abysmal. But we'll try next time. Hopefully the guys will come back, maybe new guests or standalone episodes. But we happy for it. And I want to apologize to everybody who's had to say, go and drink something, you get carried away. It was because of the net, guys. I was out it. I didn't know what was going on. I was feeling it, but I'm glad we all got to say our bit. I want to thank everybody once again. Terrence, thanks so much for coming through. Right, because we really struggled to get someone on from the community, And James, thank you so much for agreeing, because I know that's how it was not easy to make the time to come and do this. I know you had a lot of things you had to put off and things, so I'm really grateful for that. So again, happy Pride Month to everybody, as we did it within Pride Month, and and everybody be safe. We know we still have this pandemic going on and whatnot. We may be traveling in a bit, who knows, but just exercise caution, and let's hope that we can return to some normalcy sooner than later. Book a ticket.
Yeah, let's book a ticket and come back now. All right?
Yeah.
All right, guys. Later.
Yes, fellas. Easy.
Yeah.
Later.
Bless.